All right, welcome to episode 14 of The Magic Hour. We've got a full house in here today. We've got a number of co-hosts with me. Ella Jenkins, welcome.
Thank you.
Ella's pretty much booted Professor Andrew Leslie out of his regular chair, but Andrew, you've snuck in today as well, so welcome to you.
Happy just to make the bench.
Excellent. Good to have you. Now, we've got a very special guest here today. Georgie Purcell, MP, welcome to the Magic Hour.
G'day, everyone. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. It's great to have you here. Now, Georgie, you're obviously a member of the Animal Justice Party, a member of the Victorian Legislative Council, and you're electorate up in Northern Victoria. Let's get started with today's chat, and we can take it to a number of different places. But obviously, you know, I guess you're most well known in the public eye as a politician, and we'll get to that. But just really getting started, I always like to take people back to childhood, which not everyone loves to talk about. But I think that's where a lot of our beliefs and influences come from. So, would love to take you back there, and obviously, you're quite well known as a vegan as well. So, I'd love to find out, just a little bit about your childhood and veganism and how that all sort of came about for you.
Yeah, so I have actually told this story a number of times since I got elected because I think a childhood experience really led me to where I am now. And it also ties into the work that you guys do because my passion for animals came from pigs. And of course, I've tried your cultivated pork. And for many people, when I talk about why I'm so passionate about cultivated meat, it's actually this experience I had when I was 4 years old. So I grew up in a regional town outside of Geelong. About 400, 500 people lived there at the time. And the main industry in the town and the main form of employment was agriculture and animal agriculture. So I think people that grow up in the country sort of go one of two ways. They end up in that space themselves and they accept it and it's normalised, or you really see the realities that a lot of people actually don't ever get to witness. And I certainly went to the other side. And when I was 4 years old, I was riding my bike, learning to ride my bike down the highway. And coincidentally, it was around the time that Babe was very popular. I just watched Babe. I loved pigs. I thought they were amazing. And I saw this truck full of them. And I said to my parents, where are they going? And I'm so thankful for this. My parents were completely honest with me. And it's a privilege, I think, that a lot of kids don't get, is that real honest conversation and the truth told to them so that they can learn where their food is coming from. And I just said, my parents say I was very matter of fact about it. I just said, I'm not doing that anymore. And they said, okay. And I went vegetarian at that age. And a lot of people, I think, lose that passion, or it's sort of, I guess, bullied out of them at school, or, they get different interests or priorities, or they don't want to be that sort of uncool person that cares about animals, but stuck with me. And obviously I ended up pursuing it as a career and still working to change the lives of pigs since then.
Amazing. How did you, I guess, handle, at the time, I have a similar sort of personal experience in terms of, peer pressure and those sorts of things. What made you stick so steadfast to it then and all the way through to now, do you think?
Yeah, so it turns out I still am a human, because I had about 18 months of high school where I didn't ever go back to eating pigs, but I started eating fish and chicken again because I went to – I'll never forget it. In my inaugural speech in Parliament, I spoke about defining moments. Those moments throughout your life where you have a really clear memory of them and it's like you could almost relive them. The pig truck story is one of them. Another one for me was one of my first school camps in high school. And I went off to high school with no one that I went to primary school with. I knew no one. And they had this thing, I guess, to throw you in the deep end where you went on school camp as your first week of school. And I have this clear memory of crying because people were picking on me for being vegetarian because I got sent up with my tray by myself. And I came home and I was just I want to fit in, I can't do this. So I did go back to it, but I do remember always feeling this immense amount of guilt for it because my views on it and my passion was so strong. And I eventually sort of realised I actually didn't care what other people thought of me. And I'm really glad that I learned that skill now being in politics because you certainly have a lot of people who don't agree with you or don't like what you do and want to criticise your policies and views and decisions. So I think it stuck with me always. And then when I got older, I met some people that I really looked up to that I think probably pushed me to that next level. So when I started at university, I met another vegan and we watched Earthlings and I went vegan. And then I had, my auntie who was very involved in politics, worked for Julie Gillard, very, very passionate about animal welfare, had been vegetarian since she was a kid herself. So I was very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of inspiring people in my life that, had the same views as me. But I think it's important for me to always point out that I'm not perfect. And while I'm so set and strong in my views now, I know it's not easy, particularly for kids like me in country towns. And veganism and vegetarianism has certainly progressed and is becoming more normalised and accepted. But it can at times make you feel like a little bit of an outcast.
Absolutely. And I think, that's a great life lesson that you've described there in terms of, sticking to what you believe in. But it's also very important, as you mentioned, of finding, I guess, some peer support as well. Like for anyone that's sort of experiencing that now, whether they're, primary school age or, whatever the issue might be, do you have any sort of tips for people looking for peer support in those sorts of incidents?
Yeah. So one of the best things that I ever did was connecting with like-minded people. And I think a wonderful progression that we've had since when I went vegetarian in what would it have been like 96 is the internet is a great place to connect and join with other people. And I certainly think some of my best support systems live in my phone. And we criticise the online world a lot and social media and the negative impacts it can have. And I certainly have experienced that as well. But I also think there's a really powerful connection in being able to connect with people around the world, just like we're doing right now, and find support in those places. So, of course, real life connections are very, very important. But something that I think has been wonderful for our community is that we have support systems and counselling and people with shared values at the tip of our fingers. So certainly reaching out to people that hold the same views as you and hopefully being able to connect with them in real life is a bonus on top of that.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice, particularly if you're in a remote area, as you said, and you don't have, that large group of people there to be able to use technology in that way for good instead of for evil in terms of social media. I think that's a really great tip.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because peer pressure is such a strong force. And I think it's a fabulous example of someone as strong as you and the way that you get through and what you go through in your everyday life, that peer pressure affected you like that. And I think that's a really, really lovely story for people to hear.
Yeah, I honestly think my childhood growing up in a country town prepared me for the life that I'm living now because, interestingly, I wouldn't say bullied at school, but maybe isolated and a bit outcast because of the way that I was. But a lot of that wasn't called out by parents or criticised by parents because it was actually coming from them. Because I went to school with kids of farmers. So they saw me as someone who was fundamentally opposed to them and what they were doing. And it can be incredibly tough for regional kids. And, people look at me now and think I represent a regional constituency now. I grew up in regional Victoria. But this idea that you can't be in the country or come from the country and care about animals. And that's a narrative that I'm really trying to overcome because I don't just live in the country now. I'm a regional Victorian kid. Like I've done it my whole life and I just happen to have this compassion for animals and I'm not alone in that. And I think we need to elevate the voices more of people, out in the sticks that are doing the work that we do because they love to create this tram tracks divide of, the vegans are in the inner city and everyone else with perceptions of the real world out in the country. And it's just fundamentally not true.
And this idea of the association with toughness, I think that's where a lot of the criticism comes out online is this really toxic, like almost it's like the Australian strong country attitude is to not have those things impact you emotionally and feel empathy for animals in that way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the enduring attitude you see online that's opposing veganism or opposing vegans.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's the same in politics. It's like kindness and empathy is weakness and don't let it show. And
exactly.
I think that in every area of life and sort of every industry, the more compassion and caring people we have involved in it is a good thing. But there's this real idea that, yeah, particularly in the political space and the same in the work that you guys are doing, that there must be something wrong with you if you're emotionally affected
This idea that
by
it's
the work
weak.
that you do. Yeah.
And so when you were growing up, what did you want to do as an adult? Like, what did you want to be? Like, what were your ideals?
Certainly not a politician. In fact, I was opposed to being a politician, I think, up until the day that I got elected, to be honest. When I was growing up, I really wanted to be a lawyer. So I always had this sense of justice.
Yeah.
And I watched an episode of Law and Order SVU when I was a kid and decided that I was going to help all the people in the world by having a career in law. And I stuck with that. I got a law degree and I'm admitted as a lawyer. And I never worked in the space, but it has been certainly helpful for me in the work that I'm doing now. But as I got older and older and more involved in animal activism, I really saw this one key thing we were always asking for, no matter what the campaign was, and we wanted the law to be changed to help animals, because so much of what happens to animals is legal, and we have this idea in our minds of we'll expose this cruelty and it will end. But the reality is all of that cruelty is protected under our laws. Yeah. So I started political lobbying with a range of different organisations and NGOs and took on some leadership roles with groups like Coalition for the Protection of Racehorses, Coalition Against Duck Shooting and Oscar's Law. And we were lobbying politicians all the time. And then I sort of was like, why are we trying to change these people's views instead of getting our own people in that building where they have that power and those connections to try and change it themselves? And coincidentally, at the same time, the Animal Justice Party was being formed, and I got asked to be a member out the front of a protest at the Melbourne Cup over 10 years ago now. And I love to reflect on that because they were trying to get to 50 members. And now we've got thousands of members across the state and, you know, thousands more across the whole country. But I joined the Animal Justice Party and really thought that getting an MP elected was a long, long way away. And I certainly never thought that I would be one of those people. And as I said, I never wanted to be a politician. It wasn't part of my plan, but I actually think it's a good thing that people who don't want to be politicians become politicians, because anyone who wants that much power probably shouldn't be in that position of power.
I was going to ask, what was your attitude towards politicians while studying law or growing up wanting to study law?
Yeah, so I think that politicians mostly go into politics for the right reasons in the beginning, but so many of them end up getting caught up in, I think, you know, different influences or this concept of power and being important. So my view on politicians, like many, many people in the country, was pretty grim. And honestly, I don't blame people for not liking politicians, because we make decisions all the time that people don't like. And also we present ourselves in a way that I think much of the community can't connect with. And I'm really trying to change that. I'm just a normal person who got elected, and I don't look like most people in politics because it's not representative of our society. There's so many different parts of our community in Victoria and across the whole country that aren't represented in our political systems. And I strongly believe that that's why so many people, particularly young people, are disengaged in it and fail to see the power and influence that it can have. But I think that's slowly starting to change. And particularly the Victorian Parliament, we've got over 50% of women for the first time in the house that I sit in. So there's more women than men. We're getting more and more young people. We still have work to do on representing other communities, but I think we're starting to get a more even balance that truly represents our society.
Definitely. And I think a big part of what you were just talking about there, it made me think of your social media presence and like the amount of people these days who are getting all of their news from social media, and also the amount of young people who are like, I just don't really want to get involved in politics, or I don't really think about politics. But it's obviously important. Like, you've got to stay informed and updated, and these are the people representing you. When people are getting all of their news and information from social media, it's so important that that's there and people feel like they can have that personal connection and understand the people who are representing them. I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you. People sometimes say to me, I don't care about politics. And my response is always, well, politics cares about you, whether you like it or not. And we're making decisions all the time that impacts everyone's lives. And that's why I made a commitment to myself when I got elected that I would stay honest and authentic about myself and who I am and connecting with people like a normal person. So I am sick to death of just seeing these photos, no offense to any of my colleagues if they happen to listen to this, of these like men in suits standing with their hands by their sides at the front of a hospital with some like line that was given to them by, you know, someone higher up about what they had to say. Just be a normal person. Like, we are normal people. I know a lot of them in real life and they're fine. And, you know, we are just people doing our best trying to create a change. And politicians are allowed to have flaws and they're allowed to be different and they don't have to be cookie cutter. And I think slowly there's a few of us in there that are starting to change that a bit and just connecting with our people like they are people and, you know, representing them in the best way possible.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. I mean, Andrew, I don't know about you, but when I was at uni, you know, there was a lot of like politics clubs at uni at that stage.
Still
Ella,
exists.
I was about to say, Ella, what is it like now? You're at uni now.
Yeah, I mean, I had an interesting conversation with someone about this the other day, actually, about how their opinion on it was that people aren't as much involved in politics on campus these days. Like, but there's definitely, you know, your socialist alternative, the young liberals, but people don't get super involved unless they're super passionate about it. I think people are afraid to be super passionate about their politics. Like, I think a lot of people have views that would align with the political clubs that are represented on campus, but are afraid to go and actually engage in it because they don't want to be seen as political people, but their views deep down, which they would speak about every day, do actually align with it. But yeah, I think it's becoming more of an accepted thing and more people are talking about it.
There's a lot of MPs in Parliament that used to be in student politics and reflect on it. And I was never involved in student politics despite, I guess, being political. And I think it's a really interesting point you make because people often like to, I think, it's like they want to be Switzerland or something and they say, I'm not political. But everything that we do is political. You know, everything we eat is political. Every decision we make is political. So many people just don't tie those decisions that they make in their daily lives to their politics and what it means. And perhaps if they engaged in it more, the good outcomes we could create from it.
And in a way, it's a privilege to be able to say that you're not a political person or you're not involved in politics because that means you're not actually under the pressure of having to think about these things day to day.
You don't feel the effects.
And that's like, and I think it's interesting talking to people who are specifically involved in animal activism because that even more so is relevant in that, you know, animals cannot represent themselves. So it's interesting thinking about like the scenarios where we're obligated to take a stand on things or when it's important to be vocal about your morals and get involved and take action.
Yeah, I think as vegans, sometimes the people that I receive the most pressure or criticism from is actually from vegans in our own community. And I get it because I have the same views as them. Like, I want animal liberation yesterday. And something that I've had to learn to do in my role is I have to be pragmatic and I have to work with the people that I can work with and I have to negotiate with people who I fundamentally disagree with on most things. But if I can create little bits of progress that improve the lives of animals throughout my career while working towards this greater goal, I'll absolutely do that. But there's a lot of people in our community who want this outcome that's non-negotiable. And I think that we need to be better at seeing that we're not going to see the world we want for animals for quite some time. And if we can improve their lives with legislative and policy change in the interim, that's a good thing. And also it puts animals on the political agenda when they've been left off it for so long.
Absolutely.
100%.
It's just in talking about the university days, I do think it has changed. I'm going to give away my age a little bit here, but we were marching in the streets protesting about the taking away of the free university education.
I knew you were going to say that.
And I may or may not have stormed Vice Chancellor's offices and taken possession at the time, and it was really a quite large part of our university education was the politics of it, because I think back then, because it directly affected us and we could see how it was going to directly affect us, and it has affected every student sends.
I mean, to be fair, very recently there was quite a bit of a big strike going on at the uni, marching every day. And that was quite interesting and inspirational because lots of students got involved in support of the tutors and in support of the sense of community. So there is, I guess, in a sense, still that energy. People do talk about these things and people are quite passionate about it.
I think it's a really interesting point you make, though, because it goes back to what I said at the start about politicians going in for the right reasons but potentially losing that sense of purpose and their core values, because my dad speaks about those days as well, right? And now there's been a recent political discussion around increasing HECS debts. And the politicians who are making those decisions are the same politicians who got free tertiary educations, but are now turning around criticising young people who are upset because they don't want to be in debt for longer. I've been out of university for 8 years now and I still have so much debt. But it's interesting hearing this, I guess, decision-making process and criticising people in the activism space for not liking the decisions they're making when they benefited from a great system at the time.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's well, hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And there's never enough money and in government to do everything that everybody wants and making those decisions, prioritization. But education's pretty important.
Yeah, pretty important.
What were some of, I guess, when you decided to take up a career in politics, you obviously become a very public figure.
And concerning, isn't it?
Yeah. In a good way. You do become very public though, and you do, I guess, lose a lot of, your privacy and that sort of thing. And, whether I don't want to call them flaws, but anything that anyone disagrees with, they're going to, want to point out and make an issue of. That's obviously a really big step to take, to put your hand up to do that. What were some of your concerns around that, and how did you overcome it, and why what pushed you over that line to do that?
Yeah, so I spent 4 years in Parliament working as Chief of Staff to our first Animal Justice Party MP, Andy Medic, and I was complaining a lot in my time in there because I worked in Parliament on sitting weeks and, I knew all the MPs and I knew all the staffers, and there's plenty of wonderful people in there, but I sort of just would look around the place and be like, there is no one in here that represents me. There is no one in here like me. And, I'm a millennial white woman. I'm not really I'm a community that would probably be represented. And there's other communities that are even less represented. And people started saying to me, well, if you don't like it, why don't you run? Why don't you have a go? And well,
there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't.
That's right. So the reasons that I held back for so long was, by the same token, observing the place in there, I observed the very clear mistreatment of women as opposed to their male counterparts. And I saw that great sexist divide in terms of commentary. And even just today, I have been talking about, it's Daniel Andrews was Premier of this state for 9 years. Jacinta Allen's been Premier for 1 month. And today there was a cartoon in the paper of her naked on a catwalk criticising a decision that she made. So I was witnessing stuff like that. And I just thought, I don't have this thick enough skin to deal with it. There's this real idea that women in politics have to have a thick skin or you can't survive in that world. And I didn't think I could do it. So I fundamentally refused for a really long time, because not only am I a woman, I have a different past to many members of Parliament, and I'm also younger. So I have the sort of double whammy of why people think I shouldn't be in there, because you have to have this certain amount of life experience before you can represent people, apparently, and also you shouldn't be a woman. So I ended up participating in a course with a bunch of other young women who had the same concerns, and I just decided at the end of the day that there needs to be someone who tries to go out there and change the narrative on this stuff. And when I got elected, I had this great fear of the barrage that I knew was coming, but I made a commitment to myself that I was going to call it out no matter what happened. Something that happens, I think, to me as well, on top of the usual gendered criticism that women get, is I have a unique experience because being an Animal Justice Party MP, the industries that I'm taking on are often male dominated, and so there's a lot more men who feel comfortable criticizing, you know, how I look, how I act, my past, without any consideration of it. So I have, I guess, learned to deal with the way that I get treated, and I feel comfortable calling it out. And I always say to people, if I don't achieve anything in 4 years in Parliament, I hope at the very least I've made it a safer place for people who want to enter into it by helping to change the narrative. I certainly hope that I can achieve a lot of things for animals on top of that. But I think that through my actions and by just refusing to accept that this is a world that we have to live and operate in, and that we deserve safe workplaces and a safe public life, that opinion is starting to change, and there's being more awareness about what we can do to make our parliaments, I guess, more representative of society by making sure that anyone can go into them.
I can't believe it's 2023 and I have to say, or I can say to you, oh, it's great that you're doing this and you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And it's like, I forget the exact statistic, but there's something like as the population ages, the proportion of the population that's under 25 is becoming higher and higher and higher, and it is, which means that the parliament is less and less representative of the majority of the population.
It presents a massive problem for the major parties. So by our next state election, I believe, we will have more Gen Z and millennial voters than any other part of the community. And I think that they will start to feel the young people progressive issues affect, and also our community. You know, there's a lot of young people who care about animals or who are vegan that want better decisions made in relation to those issues as well.
There's the added challenge that, like, getting to that place where we have more women in Parliament and achieving like some sense of like a view of equality still comes with the fact that what you're dealing with in the same job as like an older man is entirely a different job. It's it comes with different responsibilities, different expectations. You're expected to like deal with more. There's still this like lack of equality even when there is that representation. So
it's hard to talk about criticism of female MPs, I think. I had an argument on the radio last week talking about this in relation to our Premier now, because I said I'm hesitant to criticise her in the way that many people are, because she's barely got her feet under the desk. She's taken on a massive job to lead the state, and so often criticism edges on going higher up the pyramid into mistreatment, and we need to be really, really careful about our contribution to that. And I absolutely believe that politicians should be held accountable and they should be criticised for decisions that they make that we don't like. But the reality is women are held more accountable and women are more criticised. So we need to be really aware of our unconscious biases, that everyone has unconscious biases, and those unconscious biases lead to conscious biases and decisions are being made in terms of them as well. So it's very, very hard, I think, in the political and public life space to talk about it without sounding like, don't be mean to politicians, because you should be mean to politicians sometimes. But yeah, it's a very challenging space to talk about.
I guess the distinction is that the criticism of female politicians often is so different to male politicians because it goes into that sexist place where it's immediately, whether it's like, you know, degrading or it's entirely different from like a valid criticism where it began.
Yeah. I mean, it's about how we look and what we wear.
Yeah. Intelligence or the list goes on. Yeah.
Sorry, this is a feminist podcast.
We're changing it.
That's what we're here for.
I just add, it's not just politics, and I see the way people treat you when we're out at meetings and things, and I think that's not right. And they're not expecting you to be the fully functional, very important member of our team because you're young and female. And
it's definitely interesting because I mean, like, I've gone from that experience of working in a bar and interacting with like customers in a bar and thinking, this sucks. I have a completely different experience to the men around me. But it is interesting seeing that exists everywhere, regardless of the job. And one great thing is that, like, you guys see that and understand it and somewhat very subtly like pull it in and redirect it, which I think is the most important thing when you're in a position where you have the ability to redirect and recognize and call those things out. That's what creates the most change. So yeah.
I was actually about to say the same thing because I often get asked, because I complain a lot about and highlight the treatment women get a lot. People often ask me, what's the solution? And I say it's not our problem to fix. It's actually up to men to observe it and think about what they can do and the actions that they can take to change the course of our future. And sometimes that ultimately means, I guess, disadvantage for them or, them missing out on things. But men recognizing this behavior and doing the work to call it out and to stop it is one of the most important things. And I was going to say exactly the same thing, that there has been nothing more meaningful to me than when I was in a similar position in a male-dominated workplace before I was an MP, but working in politics. I'd walk into meetings with a bunch of blokes and I would be the most senior person in our office, but they would talk to everyone in the room but me. And so often I would have someone say, what does Georgie think? Or Georgie, you'll just need to approve that first. And just acknowledging that my opinion and my contribution was valuable, I think pulled everyone else into line.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
One last thing on feminism. The
and then we stop.
Oh, sorry, not one last.
No, we've ended the patriarchy in this podcast.
It's over.
It doesn't matter anymore.
One that had a really big impact on me was I was on a travelling delegation and there was a bunch of men talking, waiting for something to happen. And one of the men told a really off-colour misogynist joke, and one of my mentors and ex-bosses called him out straight away, and there was no women present. And I think that doing that type of thing is far more effective, and you're not going to get patted on the back for doing that, but I think that has a much bigger effect. So all you men out there, listen up.
I agree.
Spot on. Yeah. Absolutely. Just knowing how difficult it has been and all the barriers that you've faced, have you had any mentors that you went in with or that you've taken on board like since you got into politics that maybe you weren't even expecting that has become a mentor or a role model or anything like that? Yeah,
absolutely. So one person that I really looked up to for some time before entering politics was Fiona Patton, who's actually from another political party, the Reason Party, but fantastic on animals as well. And I started to follow her work when she got elected because she was the first ever sex worker to be elected to certainly any parliament in Australia, but potentially the world. And I think for a lot of women with different backgrounds, I've been open about mine. I worked as a stripper when I was at university. We finally felt seen. It's like what we said before, you can't be what you can't see. And as a young person with, I guess, a very different and niche background, but who was also interested in politics, I always thought it would never be a place for me because of my past, even though I wasn't really ashamed of it, just because it wasn't normal. And I knew that it would be something that was certainly highlighted about me to try and discredit me. When she busted onto the scene, unashamed of who she was, and not only that, wanting to bring about fantastic change for people in those industries and, other communities as well, I really started to look up to her. And then, of course, I started working in Parliament and she was an MP and we became quite close and we still talk. She unfortunately was not re-elected at last election and I was really hoping she would be so we could actually be in there together as MPs. But we still talk all the time. We were just texting last night. She's been, I guess, a real unofficial mentor to me just purely by existing. And I think that a lot of unexpected politicians inspire people just by being there and sort of overcoming these perceptions of who or what a member of parliament is, because it can be anyone. So I always do say her, but also there's a lot of other members of parliament that I guess probably wouldn't say are my mentors or who have supported me throughout the journey, but who absolutely recognise the difference in treatment that they receive as opposed to me. And a lot of those are the blokes in there. And it's always important for me to point that out because a lot of the male politicians really, really back me in on stuff. in Parliament, journalists will be calling around trying to background on people, or other MPs will, be talking about other MPs. And I get quite a few stories come to me sometimes of being like, hey, so-and-so like really backed you in the other day when someone tried to say whatever, like the example you used before. So, I've got a lot of wonderful supports. And then also I have an awesome team around me of young women as well who know better than anyone sort of what we were up for when I got elected. And being a political staff member is not just a important professional role. It really comes with this burden of personally supporting the person that you work for as well, and they're fantastic at that because it's not always easy.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great segue talking about your team.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to have met a lot of your team, and they are all great. And something else that I've noticed as well, on social media in particular, is your work ethic and how many events you get to and how many different things you're doing. Would you like to talk a little bit about a week in the life of a politician? Because a lot of people won't understand, particularly, you're in a regional area. Parliament obviously sits in the city. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that week looks like, how much you rely on your team to help you do all those things? And I guess just to give you a compliment, one of many, in terms of your work ethic, like I as a small business owner and a founder, think I've got a pretty good work ethic. And I think most people do that, run a small business or are just getting started in a startup. But you outwork me 10 to 1, like no doubt. And so I'm very envious of that. And I'd love some tips around that as well in terms of how do you maintain that work ethic?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I see this job as is a guaranteed 4 years. And the last thing I want to do is wake up on November, whatever it is, 2026 and think, oh, geez, you really wasted that time in there. Because the reality is, it's a good chance I won't get re-elected. It's really hard in the upper house. So I get asked quite regularly what a day in the life of Georgie Purcell looks like, my day in a plate. And I really struggle to describe it because this job is so diverse and it is so reactive. We try and be proactive where possible. We have our campaigns and the things we planned around, but it's also incredibly reactive. Yeah. But something that I guess like a regular week for me, something that will always happen is I'm pulled away constantly to commentate on issues. And because I'm in the upper house where the government doesn't have a majority and therefore they need my vote on basically any of their legislative agenda, it not only comes with a lot of great power, which can be great for animals and for other issues, comes with a lot of responsibility of being across every other issue that's going on in the parliaments and the political space, because people want your opinion on all different things and they want to know how you're voting. So a regular week for me will be doing a lot of media on animals, but also on other issues. And on a sitting week, I'm in the city from a Sunday night and I stay there till the Friday afternoon, and my Monday is meetings. I chair a parliamentary committee, so I'm always having committee meetings. Tuesday we're sitting. We sat last Tuesday. We went from question time when the day started till 11 p.m. at night because we're banning the Nazi salute, and there was, a lot of debate on that. On the Wednesday, I went in there and the first debate spot for the day was my own, where we got a commitment from the government to add animal abuse as an offence in the Family Violence Protection Act. And then that day went till about 7 o'clock, and then I got asked to speak at an event. And then the next day is a sitting day, so I'm in there again, and I had a question in question time that day, which is always a little bit of work because you want to be well prepared. And then we went to a decent time that day, and then I went to flight facilities that night. I had a little bit of me time. I went to flight facilities, but then I got up the next morning and I was on the radio, and then going back to my electorate office for the afternoon to be back as a staff. So, it's parliament work, it's parliamentary committee work, which is a huge, when you're a chair, it's an extra amount of work, but it's great because you can sort of have direction and control over inquiries. But then I also represent the largest electorate in the entire state. It's half of Victoria, and I also feel the responsibility to get out in the electorate as well. So I'm constantly being pulled from every direction, but the things that my staff do to help relieve that is if I get a media inquiry at the last minute, they will tell me where I need to be, what I'm talking about, and also if I'm not as well briefed, they'll send me a bunch of stuff about it so that I can read it. On my travels there, they'll book in my meetings. If I'm ever in a situation where something else has come up, they'll help me reschedule. And they also, this is a tip for you about how to.
Good,
you
thank you.
for.
Yes.
One of the things that I am not good at, that I've had to be better at since I got elected, is acknowledging when I am burning out, when I'm getting fatigued, and what I need to do to manage that, because you can work as hard as you want all the time, but if you're burning out while doing so, you're not going to be doing a good job of it. So my staff have really helped me learn that it's okay to take personal time, it's okay to take a break, and it's okay to recognize when you're not at your best and put protections in place about how you can come back re-energized and ready to go and be the best advocate for animals that you can be. So for me, that's often just like having a morning and making sure that I exercise, turn my phone notifications off, and going and hanging out with my animals or walking my dogs, because it's so easy to just get sucked into that world, particularly when you're representing animals, and there's no shortage of awful things that are happening to animals, and feeling the responsibility to fix it. So I have to be mindful of that too.
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing I've always admired about you is that every time I see you, you're so warm and positive and lovely. And I really admire that, because doing the work that you're doing and seeing what you're seeing every day, it's confronting, especially when you're passionate about these issues and you care about and you have empathy. When you're seeing these things, it gets you down. Yeah. So it's really admirable.
Thank you. Cool. I just hate this idea of when you are doing the job that I'm doing, that you have to be like a robot or, like I'm not afraid to say when I'm affected by things, and I am affected by things. I got up to speak at a press conference the day that the parliamentary committee examining native bird hunting arrangements in Victoria, which I was on, and I've been working on the campaign to try and ban duck shooting for over 10 years now. It's nothing in comparison to Laurie Levy, who's been out there for decades and decades. But I feel so closely connected to it because I've been out on the wetlands as a rescuer long before I was in Parliament, and I've seen the awful cruelty that happens to ducks in Victoria. And, I got up. I'm normally warm and friendly, and I think, I think it's important to be kind, and that reflects on who we are as a community. But I got up at this press conference and my voice was obviously shaking, and it wasn't because I was nervous. I speak to media all the time. It's because I was hit with this reality that we might actually be close to bringing about an incredible change for animals that so many people have wanted for so long, including me. And I think that vulnerability and personality and emotion in politics is a good thing, and goes back to what I was saying, is politics are humans and politics are politicians are people, and we feel the issues that we work
real.
on, and that's okay. Yeah. And I think it helps people connect with us more. So I try not to hide who I am.
I respect it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's great advice too. Thank you. I will take that on board in terms of looking after yourself.
You go to the gym every day though, don't you?
I try to do something every day. Yes, that's my outlet. And I was going to mention that, physical activity I think is a really great outlet for anyone and anyone stressed by work or whatever their life situation is. And you're right, the work is just never ending. Yeah. Like there's always something to do, and so you could always be doing something, but taking that time for yourself to recharge, to be at your best, it's better to be at 80 to 90% than it is to be staying on point and being at 2 or 3% and of your capacity. So
that's right. And something that I've actually started doing that I've never seen a politician do is I tell people when I'm on a break. So MPs in Parliament will be like, I'm going to, Bali, or I'm going to Europe for a week. It's fine. You're allowed to have a holiday. But what they'll do is they'll bank up all these like social media posts of things that they've done while they're here and try and hide that they're on holiday, and then someone will see them there and it ends up in the paper. I've actually started telling my followers and the people who support me, I'm taking a break and this is why, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to be better and I'm going to do this. Because I can recognize with the thousands of things that we need to do to help animals, I'm not going to be able to do it if I'm not feeling like I can function in my brain and I've got too many tabs open. But it's different for everyone about what helps them, cope. But one thing that I think everyone can agree on is there is a lot of burnout in animal activism.
100%.
Like, you're one of the people I've known that's hung around for the longest. Like, the amount of people since I've been in it, there's the amount of people that you see come in and out, and they stay vegan and they stick to their values, but they don't stick to working on the causes because they get so affected by the things that they see and do, and have to leave our community. And I don't blame them for it, but until we can recognise that we can't do everything and that it's okay to take time for ourselves, I think that we'll get stronger and more powerful.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And you're right, burnout is a massive, massive issue. Because there's just always something else to do. There's always another issue to tackle, and there's not a lot of wins. Let's be honest. There's not a lot of wins, and I think something that I need to get better at, and we need to get better at, and everyone needs to get better at is celebrating those small wins.
Yeah,
because those large wins are few and far between. But when they come, they'll be massive. Yeah. But there's going to be a lot of time in between them.
I feel the same way. We actually do in my office. You might have seen it, Good News for the Month, where we'll look at everything happening for animals around the world, or just progressive issues and promote it. But you're so right. You get so used to losing in this space. And I didn't actually fully connect with it till the other day when I was handing out at a booth in the small country town that I grew up in with my brother, and for the Yes 23 campaign. It was the first time he ever really engaged with a political issue on a personal level, where he was invested and he was talking to his friends and he was volunteering, and he had his core flutes up out the front, obviously yes ones. And at the end of the day, he called me when the polls started being published, and he just said, I am devastated, and I had to call you because for the first time I've realised what it's like to be invested and to work on something and to believe in it deeply and to not get the outcome. And he was like, I feel like I can't pick myself up, but you just go and do it every day. And it really made me realise how used to losing we get in this space that we do, and why it's so important to celebrate each other's wins and acknowledge each other's wins, because that gives us the strength to keep on going.
Absolutely. Like there's just, you could relate it to so many different things as well, and not just animal activism, any activism, any public role when you're a minority, if you're trying to convince someone of something, it's just no fundraising for all of our business owners.
Gee, why did I know you were thinking about that one?
Yeah, but it's just like no. Finally get a yes. Back to no's. No. So look, it really is. It's a great point that you raised.
And for any scientists out there, you can also relate it to grant submissions. I know that's what they're all thinking of.
Thanks, Andrew. Talking about, I guess, goals, and I'm going to say the word duck shooting because I forget the correct term. In terms of the wildlife.
Yeah.
Avian, whatever the parliamentary committee that you're on.
I just say the duck shooting inquiry.
Okay, good. The duck shooting inquiry.
It was called the Select Committee Inquiring into Victoria's Native Bird Hunting Arrangements.
Okay, I don't feel so bad now. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, we got there in the end. So obviously duck shooting is like a major goal for you. What are some of the other goals, I guess, you've got that are top of mind at the moment for your term? Yeah,
so duck shooting is obviously a big one that we've worked really, really hard on, but we're also heavily focused on greyhound racing. And I guess using animals for gambling in general is something I'm pretty passionate about, and something that I was heavily involved in campaigning against before I got elected. But we really see greyhounds as critical ground at the moment, because over recent years, the industry has been exposed for some pretty awful things, and it's really brought to light the need to help these dogs. And as a result of that, they've had to do more to make sure these dogs end up in homes. When these dogs end up in homes, people connect with them, they see them on the street, they adopt them. And it's created this massive tide against greyhound racing, because you meet a greyhound and they're the opposite of what you think they will be. And also on top of that, there's a movement around the world to end greyhound racing. In fact, New Zealand's just had an election. Their new government have committed to banning it. There's only 2 tracks left in the whole of the United States. Many other countries around the world have banned it. So we see it as, I guess, a bit of a weak link of the racing industry. working really hard on that. I was just in the US talking to politicians about that, but also kangaroos.
Yep.
So our treatment of native wildlife here in Australia is rather interesting. We shoot our iconic native animals that we use as tourism draw cards at night time to be exported overseas, for skins and soccer cleats. And there's actually a bill before US politicians at the moment to ban the import of kangaroo skins. If that passes, we know it would have a significant economic impact on our industry here. So we're hoping that happens, because it's only done as an easy option for the government to not have to find ways for us to coexist with wildlife. They're only doing it because we're destroying their habitat, and people are complaining that they're getting in the way. So I guess all of the different systems that see our wildlife exploited is something that we're trying to fix, but also farmed animals. So I spoke about pigs at the start of my connection to them. I'm about to kick off a parliamentary inquiry into pig gassing in Victoria, but also pig confinement, because we're lagging behind everywhere else in the world in terms of sow stalls and gestation crates. And of course, there's also battery cages for hens that we still have that many other countries have gotten rid of. So I'll be chairing that inquiry. And we're hoping you guys will be involved in it, actually, because we're obviously going to be exploring options outside of animal-based meats and, the opportunities that are presented for other industries where we can feed our growing population without having to kill animals in such a awful way. Because the reality is we only introduced pig gassing so we could stun more animals more quickly so that we could meet the demand for meat. So that's, I guess the high level issues, but we're always, every single day, someone will come to our office with a new bit of evidence of cruelty that, has come to light, or a new campaign. And we basically don't turn anyone back. We try and find ways to work with everyone where we possibly can. And yeah, I mean, we've had our win last week on family violence as well, and looking to do more in that space, just to, I guess it's strengthening any bit of legislation that we possibly can to protect animals, because so many people don't realise the way that our relationships with animals, and whether they be companion animals or farmed animals or native animals, so many pieces of legislation that come through our parliament can actually impact their lives, and having a team in there that can examine that and try and improve it for them is, a great thing. So whether it be big or small, we're working away at it.
Excellent. Good to hear. Good to hear. How do you go about prioritising those issues that do come up?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because we get asked it a lot, and sometimes we often do have to, I guess, regroup and regather and change sort of where we're prioritising things. So with duck shooting, the reason that we put so much into that is because we knew it was so close to being done, and that we had this parliamentary inquiry. So a huge part of my work the second I got elected was getting myself on that committee and making the case. And then we got the recommendation in the report to ban it, and we're waiting for the government to respond. So we know that if an issue is sort of on a knife's edge, and by changing our priorities we can potentially knock it off completely, we'll do that. Then, of course, we're often responding to different advocacy groups. We often talk about this pyramid in animal advocacy, where we're up here at the top, politics and parliament is up here, but every level of the pyramid plays an important role. So there's campaigning, investigating, activism, education, litigation, and it all plays a role to sort of reaching this top level where we can be the messengers and the law changes in Parliament. So often we're responding to advocacy groups. For example, Farm Transparency Project will say, we've got this pig gassing footage coming out. What do you think that you can do? And then, we've gone ahead and got this parliamentary inquiry. So it's working with different stakeholders in our community to elevate their work and getting it to that critical point where we think we might be able to get the outcome. The other way that we do it is we have a lot of private conversations internally, and if there's a particular issue that we know internally, particularly with government MPs, that they want to see change on, we'll start sort of riling the public and the community up on it, so that they can put on the internal pressure and hopefully change it from the inside. So yeah, there's a few different elements to it, but yeah, it is a very delicate balancing act, but we're always chipping away normally at something, no matter what level it's at. Yeah.
We can certainly see that. There's always something going on. Always something going on. I'll take a fairly long bow here in terms of that segue, but given that you mentioned pork, we've obviously produced cultivated pork and cultivated lamb as well. And you've tried our cultivated pork
many times now.
Yes,
lucky.
Very many times actually. Yes. What were your thoughts when we first sort of? Well, what were your thoughts when you first sort of came across the concept of cultivated meat for the very first time? And then following that, when you had the opportunity to try cultivated meat, what was sort of your thought process there as well?
Yeah, I love this question because I was definitely one of those vegans that was like, support it, like think it's great. I think that cultivated meats are one of the most vital instruments in our, I guess, journey to bringing about a kinder world for animals because most people wouldn't consider themselves cruel to animals, but most people eat meat and they're so disassociated with the ways that their food is created. And if they had the option to eat meat without the animals, I think most people would. But I always said, I think it's great, I think it's important, but I wouldn't try it because it's still an animal. And then when I actually got confronted with the opportunity to do it, I decided that I would, because if I'm going to vouch for this thing, number one, I feel like I need to say that I've tried it. But also I think as I've progressed throughout my journey in activism and veganism is we often say in my office, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And cultivated meat is going to bring about so much good. And I get frustrated in the vegan community when people will criticize the existence of cultivated meat because it continues this idea that animals are ours to be used. I don't agree with that, first of all, but the amount of animals that we could save by promoting, normalizing and getting cultivated meat on supermarket shelves is, astronomical. I don't need to tell you guys that. So I think that when I first tried it, I had this moment of, I really need to be out there advocating for this because it's one of the most important things that we can do to bring about this change that we want to see, that we're working away on. Like, we could get sow stalls and pig gassing banned tomorrow if we, if we could, we would. But say we did do that, it doesn't change the fact that people still want to eat pigs, and we need to find ways for people to do the things that they want to do in a way that's not harming animals. So obviously I'm a very, very big believer in it. And I've spoken to many of my parliamentary colleagues about you guys who have all said that they would love to try it. So they often ask me when they'll be able to, and I say it's a work in progress and that they need to talk to their federal counterparts about speeding up this process.
They can come down anytime. It's $1 million a head though. So that will be fine. Look, I mean, obviously, we thank you so much for your support in terms of what we're doing. Obviously we take a pragmatic approach to having an impact for animals as well. I feel like I've monopolised the conversation.
You've all tried it, haven't you?
My friends don't trust me when I say it tastes good.
Yeah.
And it tastes like meat.
Yeah.
And even people within the company don't trust me. So we have our resident carnivores, the omnivores that eat a lot of meat.
I think that's so important though, because it needs to be right. But also people say to me, what does it taste like? And I say, like meat. And they say, well, how would you know you haven't eaten it for so long? And I was like, it's a fact I haven't eaten meat for so long that I know it tastes like meat, because I eat meat replacements. But something I've always said is plant-based meats, they're good in their own right, but I know that they don't taste exactly like meat. Cultivated meat is something that I would feel comfortable feeding to a meat eater with complete confidence that, they wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Don't feel that safety around other plant-based products.
No, yes. I get a lot of feedback about that all the time. If people want to get involved, what's the best way for people to get involved? Obviously, join the Animal Justice Party, stand for a seat, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But if you're not interested or you don't feel like politics is for you, what are some other ways, I guess, you could help and get involved?
Yeah, so one of the most important things that for me to acknowledge is I'm the face of the Animal Justice Party in Victoria now, which is a great honour and privilege. But I got where I am through an absolute army of volunteers who have no interest in being MPs themselves or politicians, but who wanted to see someone in there doing the work for animals. So volunteering on our political campaigns and election campaigns is one of the most important things that you can do. All evidence points to if we have a volunteer on a polling booth, our vote significantly increases, but it's really, really hard to fill every polling booth in the state with a volunteer handing out how to vote cards. So our next election is not for a few years now, but it's never too soon to get involved. We start planning them relatively early. We also have a number of working groups within the party that anyone can join and, help us form our policies or social media or ways of communicating with the public. But if people think that, political activism for animals isn't their space, there is a range of incredible animal rescue groups and advocacy groups and NGOs in our state. We're so lucky. I always say that there is an organisation for every single campaign and every single species in Victoria, which keeps me very, very busy because it's a lot of people to speak to. But we're so lucky to have all these dedicated people volunteering, mostly volunteers their time to create a kind of state. So if anyone has a particular sort of issue or campaign or animal they're passionate about, my office is also very happy to point them in the right direction about how they can get involved.
Amazing. Andrew, any final comments from you?
I guess I'd just say we haven't talked a lot about cultivated meat, and if you're listening to the podcast because you're a Georgie fan person, which I know there's a lot of you out there, then if you want to find out more information, you can go to our socials, and they're all linked from our website at www.magicvalley.com.au, and I'm just really thankful for everything you've done to help promote us and especially for coming on the podcast today, Georgie.
Thank you. I've said this to you before, my little rant about this, but I'm so passionate about the work that Magic Valley is doing because I've just been in the US where a lot of people are talking about cultivated meat as well. And I think as a community, it's really important for us to band together to talk about what are the best things that we can do and do soon to end animal suffering and animal cruelty in the work that you're doing. It might not always be like the sexiest and the most out there and, the most visible, but it is, in my opinion, the most important. So we're so glad that there's people like you with a very specific expertise who are willing to do this and, help us bring about our collective goal.
Thank you. Appreciate that so much. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you? Obviously, Instagram, where I follow you.
Yes.
But what about people that want to get in touch with your office and things like that?
Yeah. So I'm on all forms of social media on georgie.purcell.ajp. But the best way to get in touch with my office is via email, which is georgie.purcell@parliament.vic.gov.au. I also have an office landline, but because I'm a millennial, I don't know it off by heart. I remember my home phone number from when I was a kid, but not my office one. But if you look me up on the Parliament website, my landline is also there. That's very shameful of me.
I'll just AI edit your voice.
Yeah, please. Someone AI edited me into a radio interview the other day and I've never been more terrified in my life.
Oh, that is terrifying.
Yeah. That'll be the podcast soon. You can say you've had any guests on. People won't know.
That's terrifying. And on that note,
let's wrap up for today's podcast.
This was totally real.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for coming in, Georgie. We really appreciate your time and everything you do for animals and your support of us as well.
Thank you, everyone. And the feeling's mutual.
Amazing.
Thank you.